Welcome, Reanimated fans, to this week's episode. I'm H.A. Conrad, coming to you from the East Coast, along with my intrepid co-host, Stuart Tiffin. Hello, Stuart.
Hello, HA.
And how does the West Coast hail this fine morning?
It's westernly.
It's hailing?
No, it's not, thank goodness, but it is. We are over here.
Hmm. So today we are going to be talking about a movie that I am excited to chat with you about. It's called Apocalypse Z, and this is a zombie film that takes place in Spain. And like all these types of films, it makes me want to go to these places, even though mayhem is happening within the film.
Hmm.
Um, but before we get to that, let us talk about some of the news that has been coming down the wire. Some very exciting news about The Last of Us. We have an actual release date of April 13th. I'll admit I was hoping it was going to be a little bit earlier, but very much looking forward to this. This is going to be very exciting to be able to kick that off again.
Very exciting. It's a Sunday, so I guess they're going to be doing this as premiere Sunday TV. That's fine. I also just was reading around for other stuff on Last of Us, and I found an interview with GQ where they've talked about this being a multiple season effort to get to this to the end of this story.
Yeah,
So it's not they're not just going to do it in one because it was fewer episodes than season one, as I recall, right? It's like seven or something.
yeah,
So
it's a lot less. I actually thought they were going to release it on Easter Sunday and have a little tongue-in-cheek thing, but they're not doing that. But just Sunday before, so Palm Sunday, they're releasing this. Um, but no, I don't think that they can wrap it up in this many episodes. So I'm kind of excited to see what happens within this season, and that means that we'll have probably at least one more season, if not two, to wrap up the whole storyline, which is just pretty cool.
yeah, they've been really coy about how many seasons.
Right,
So
right.
because they're
Well,
just like more than one, and then they're like, wouldn't you like to know how many?
yeah.
Mason and Druckmann are having too much fun with this stuff.
Yeah. And in other very exciting news, Murderbot, for those of you that are familiar with the books, um, it's the Murderbot Diaries, based on the Murderbot Diaries by Martha Wells. But this is going to be coming out on Apple TV and stars one of my favorite people, Alexander Skarsgård. I'm kind of a big fan of the Skarsgård family in general.
They tend to do a lot of cool stuff. I agree.
Yeah. And so that's pretty exciting. I haven't really like actually my cousin had mentioned these books and I had not been as familiar with them, and then I started to tear through them and it's pretty cool.
They're really easy reads.
Yeah.
It's almost yeah. It's insane how fast you can plow through one of these books. And I feel like I'm on the seventh or eighth one now, and it's still just like yeah, I could do that, or I could hold off and let it last.
They're
But yeah,
like
Alexander
they're like
Skarsgård is so well suited to be this like emotionless robot, and I think that the AV Club article here does a good job. They're like, yeah, he's got a CV filled with portrayals of inhuman animals or creatures like vampires, demons, and tech bros. Uh, so.
Vikings. I'm sorry.
So he's ready. I think he is he could be perfect for this. And then they've got a couple pictures of the costuming. And Nota Brava here. There's no zombies in Murderbot. This is just about a murderous robot.
Yeah,
In
but I'm excited for it and I'm going to talk about it anyway.
yeah, yeah. I don't think we'll probably review it, but it's just cool to see that they're making it, and we're excited. That's all.
Yeah. Um, and then let's see what else did we have? Actually, a few little news items this week.
Yeah, I found this. I don't know how I did it. How did I do this? It was just in my YouTube recommended things to watch, and there's a video of Kevin Durant. Not Kevin Durant, the NBA star, but Kevin Durant, the Canadian character actor who's in literally everything since 1990s. And he's talking about on this podcast how the strain was to put together. And I found it to be, first of all, you don't get to see Kevin Durant on you don't get to see him out of character very often, so it was pretty cool just to see him on
Yeah.
that.
Cool.
and he's talking about how they couldn't keep a production crew together on the strain because of how it was basically all night shoots, um, and just a very difficult production schedule, and that it was a slog. But how much fun he had in it, and from the podcast Inside of You, which I'd never heard of, but apparently it's quite popular, where this guy, the hosts, talk to a bunch of different actors. One of the other interviews they have is with Steve Ogg, where he's talking about how much he enjoyed working with Andrew Lincoln, which I thought was pretty cool too. On The Walking Dead, Steve Ogg having played Simon, Lieutenant Simon to Negan. This is number two. It's an interesting little podcast. I feel like there's a lot more of these out there now. Even John Bernthal has one, right?
Yep.
So that's kind of the news there. I would say try to find this podcast Inside of You on YouTube and look for this interview. Well, this is a clip from the interview that they did where Kevin Durant is talking about how he was playing Fett, how he convinced God, what's the name of the director? My brain is literally
I'm,
disappearing in front of me.
yeah, our brains are gone, much
He
like.
is an Oscar-winning director and he wrote the book
Oh,
and I just can't
la
remember
la
his
la la
name.
la. Oh gosh. This is
Guillermo del Toro.
yes, yes.
He like
Okay, I will
Kevin
tell you, I almost said Benicio del Toro,
Benicio del Toro,
but
that would
he's
have been
the
rude.
actor. That is the
Yep.
actor, not
Yeah, and not associated with the strain. But
not at all.
Guillermo del Toro was trying to tell Kevin Durant that Fett doesn't really smile. He's very serious. And Kevin Durant talks about how, he read the books and he's like, look, in the books, there's a lot of like inner monologue where he seems to be much more emotional. And I want to play up that part of it and just watch me do some work here. And he managed to convince Guillermo del Toro, who created his character, that, his characterization of Vasily Fett was not necessarily the only one, the only interpretation. I just think it's really cool to hear actors talk about their craft that way and how they can kind of, dig into a person that they're reading on a piece of paper and bring it to life and do it in a way that's surprising even to the guy who came up with the character, you know? I think that that's super interesting. Sometimes actors are just really insightful.
Yeah, they are, and especially when it's something like this where it's somebody that's clearly been very involved, and I would say involved in a way, like it depends on what the collaboration is between actors and directors, but clearly Guillermo del Toro gave him a pretty like and I think welcomed his input
I
into
think it
this. So
took a bit of persuasion, but yeah, eventually he
maybe,
did. Yeah. Also,
maybe.
Kevin Durant just has like charisma. Like he can make even, remember him and Abigail, and where he was like a goon, but he was also kind of likable, you know? I think he just has that energy about him.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
so that's the Inside of You podcast with Kevin Durant. See if you can find it. And then finally, there's another zombie movie that was getting promoted on Bloody Disgusting with a exclusive trailer. Have you had a chance to see this, HA?
Yeah, and I had seen this trailer before, but because some people were reviewing it, I think over the summer maybe, but it's now it's a like video on demand, right, on Apple.
Going into March, going
It'll
on to
it'll
demand
be
in March. Yeah,
March. And it looks, I mean, it looks really like good. The premise of it is kind of interesting, which is just like, which is kind of fun for horror fans like you and me. But basically, like the whole premise of there's a zombie outside, which is the name of the film, is following an artist who's basically super into cinema and stuff, and uh, like it's a blending of reality and fantasy. And so the trailer's pretty good. What did you think of it?
yeah. It looks like a mind
Yeah,
game.
it's
So like you're
definitely.
not sure if the zombie is. I think you're pretty much even in the trailer, you're kind of convinced that the zombie's not real. But there's enough also elements here where maybe it's some sort of Nightmare on Elm Street sort of scenario, or who knows. But yeah, it looks fascinating. The way that the trailer was cut together felt a little bit amateurish, but
It did, but it felt also campy, so I'm not gonna take away from them on that point. And I'm can't wait to see it. In that's coming very soon, so March 4th. So it's just exciting. So lots of stuff on our roster, which is pretty cool.
yeah.
So, are you ready to jump into Apocalypse Z?
Colon, the beginning of the end. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
When this first showed up on Amazon Prime, I think it was at the end of the summer, give or take, or maybe just yeah in the fall. Looks like it was released on October 5th, 2024. I was like, what? Where did this come from? A Spanish zombie movie? And then they were like, there was the tagline based on the international bestseller or something along those lines. And so I had to read this book. And it's a series of books. So I've only read the first one. And I don't know if they're going to make more movies. They seem to suggest that that might be the
Um,
case.
so the sequel is in production.
Oh my goodness.
Yep. So that's
Uh,
exciting. And this is
yeah.
the director of this is Carls Torrens, and he is I don't really know his work, but apparently he's pretty well known he for like more short films and things like that. But I would say that this is I really really enjoyed this film. So I'm excited, and I hope he's the one directing the sequel. And there isn't more than that I could find about that, like when it would be released, but I'm excited that it's hopefully happening. So, um, but yeah, this is and it's especially good, and I'm gonna spoiler alert all, like this ends on a cliffhanger, so
Yeah.
I immediately after watching this was like, oh my gosh, I really hope there's another one in production. So I'm glad to hear that they are going to be doing that. So,
Yeah. I would say the only source that I'm seeing, at least associated with this Spanish Wikipedia page, is the Voice of Galicia or La Voz de
mhm.
Galicia, saying that the sequel is in production. But that's exciting. I mean, if they can make three movies out of this, that'll be cool. I did read the book uh, back in the fall before I saw the film because I'm trying to read more of our genre too. And it's an interesting book. It's quite different from the film, not in plot, but in construction. Because actually, the guy who wrote this, Manel Loureiro, is he started writing it as a blog. I think he was actually a lawyer at the time, which is there's a lot of similarities between Manel, the author of the book, and the character known as Manel in the film that we watched for today. But
So
in the
a
book
little
is
bit,
completely presented as a series of blog posts.
so
Um,
a little bit like um, The Martian, because that's kind of how that was written too. It was like
yeah,
a
that makes
so.
sense. Yeah, and honestly, it works really well as a storytelling conceit for the novel. You never know the name of the character who you're being, you're reading his entries into his diary basically. And they use him sending like WhatsApp video messages to his sister as that me mechanic for the film that we watched. But it's very interesting. I don't know. We've read other books that were like basically a series of diary entries, right? I think it was Autopsies of the Dead or whatever.
Yep.
Remember that we read that book so many years ago. But that's it's a fun book. And so the point of me saying all this is just that it it still follows the basic same story, but obviously whenever you go from book to film, you end up losing some elements, and I might be
I will tell you that I am very happy that I mean they used some messenger video type things in this, and I'm very glad they did it this way versus so many texts, because that's one thing I was actually complaining about the other day because I'm older and I can't really read some of those texts if they're like actually in text form on the screen, unless the screen is really big. And I just think the way that they decided to handle that in this film was actually pretty effective, with like more video messages. So, however realistic or not that might be. So I actually thought that that was a good fix for it. Um, but yes, I'm really excited. I hope that they continue to do this. I didn't read the books, but now I am inspired to. So,
yeah, it was a fun read. It went really fast also. So you've mentioned the director, Carlos Torrens. The screenplay was adapted by a guy named Angel Agudo. And then you've got our lead is Francisco Ortiz, who plays Manel. I
mhm.
just thought it was funny that they named the character after the author of the book.
No, I know.
And you've got a really recognizable Jose Maria Yazpic as Prichenko, which is a funny kind of not recast, but a funny switch on this character because in the book he's just a Ukrainian guy. He's like not half Mexican, which is what they do for the film here. But Jose Maria Yazpic is very recognizable to anybody who ever watched Narcos. He was in 4 seasons of that show. Well, 1 season of Narcos and then 3 seasons of Narcos Mexico or Mexico as a character called Amado. Um, and he's just a striking looking guy,
Yeah, and
I
he's a
think.
good, I mean, he's also a really, he has, his acting is incredible and he does a lot without dialogue. There's a lot that is exchanged, like a lot of looks that are exchanged between him and Manal that are like, that are really like more than words could convey. And so I enjoyed their interactions and I thought they also had really great chemistry, as allies in this film.
Yeah.
So
And he's not introduced until like halfway through the film,
yeah.
too. Another significant character is the woman playing his sister, Belen,
Mm.
Marta Poveda. They don't have any scenes together. They just well, actually, they do at the very
They have
beginning.
one. They have
But
one.
there's just a lot of like video calls that they're on. But she comes across as the most useful sister in the zombie apocalypse that anybody should hope to
Yes.
have.
Yeah.
She's
Um,
she's constantly out there trying to get Manel out of hot water, but
yep.
not actually, necessarily succeeding.
Right.
And then there's a few other characters. The guy who plays Ushakov is kind of like a Steven Seagal
Yeah.
Spanish Russian analog. It's kind of funny. Yuri Mikhailichenko.
Better you than me.
There's Lucia, who comes in the third act, is played by Berta Vasquez. Lucia is, I would say, a problematic character in the book. I don't want to spoil it for UHA, but
Sure.
I will just say this much. She is, the way that she's written about, she's supposed to be like a 14 or 15-year-old girl,
Oh,
and she's a little bit, I would say, over sexualized for
in the
the
book,
purposes of the story. It doesn't need to be there. I just don't think it serves any purpose.
this is
Yeah.
yeah, because
Yeah,
she seems
whereas
older
she's
in
like a
the
20 something nurse, right, in the movie. So that I
Mhm.
thought that was more appropriate. And also not sexualized at all. Like she's just an efficient character. Like she gets stuff done in the movie. Yeah, there's other people in this. It's not a huge cast, which is nice. There's not a huge cast of characters in the book either. In fact, Gabriella, who we meet in the first act is, or second, I don't know where you would draw that line, is a character introduced just for the movie. Oh, and there's his wife too, Yulia, who you don't even get like all the action picks up in the books a year after she's already been dead. So you don't even have any of the benefit of these flashbacks. But that does help in the movie version to drive kind of more of his inner workings that you wouldn't get access to otherwise.
Exactly. Also, you're forgetting to mention a very important cast member.
Oh, Lucolo. Who is Lucolo played by?
I don't know, but and it should be of us, whoever Luca is played by, because he is like to me a key member. I also like when you look up Lucalo, the biggest question is, does he live? That's kind of funny.
Was he? Yeah, is he in the final scene?
That's well, I don't know, but I know that he lives because everybody says, yeah, he's in the
Is he
helicopter.
in the helicopter? I'm like trying to remember now if I even saw him in there, but
He makes
huh.
it in all the books, right?
I don't recall. I haven't seen this. I haven't read the second book, but I'm just like, huh. I feel like the action was definitely much more on the humans in that third act than on Lucolo. He was kind of just there to be petted occasionally. Um, anyway, it's yeah, Lucolo is a precocious little cat. Reminds me of Skidmark from Fear the Walking Dead.
Yeah, yeah, totally.
Very chatty as a cat. In fact, maybe the chattiest cat I've ever seen.
Yep.
Especially like the part where the soldiers are coming to Manel's door and Lucalo is like kind of growling at them. I'm like, what is this, a dog or a cat? Come on, make up your minds. Because that just seems like odd behavior. I don't know. I don't know cats that talk this much, but
Well,
Lucalo
it's
is.
really funny. There's like a bunch of articles, and one article, it's from this, I guess, like a blog or something called Little Buddy the Cat. And they say that like that it stars, Francisco Ortiz as Manel, and who's the servant of a talkative cat named Luca, which I think is pretty funny,
That is good.
which is kind of true. Um, but yeah, Luca almost gets into a lot of trouble. But he's definitely a main character in this film, and I was very focused on him. And I do think that they kind of like conveniently don't sort of show you what's happening with him all the time, but then he reappears over and over again. So um hopefully he's all right throughout this series because that won't fly with me if this doesn't work out for him. So we must preserve the cat at all costs. So
Yes. Save the cat.
yeah,
Okay.
sorry.
Right. No, no, no. Yeah, yeah. It's
Bad
good. It's good.
tangent.
It's good. It's good. I was just having another unrelated thought that I need to kick out of my head. So the beginning of this film starts in, I forget what city they're in. Are they in Barcelona? Doesn't I don't
Oh no,
recall.
they're in Galicia. Uh,
Okay. I
and they're
think
the whole
in the book his sister lives in a major city like Barcelona and he actually does go to visit her, but it's like a different construction. This is a nice little scene. You get to be introduced to his insane nephew who is just loopy about Lucalo.
all kids are.
I, all kids are loopy about Lucalo, maybe,
Yeah,
but
as we see.
this this kid, I think his only line is Lucalo, Lucalo, where's Lucalo?
Yeah,
Like
that's
in every scene he's in.
um and I should also say like the whole it looks like almost everything I was seeing where the production took place. It happens in Vigo, which is
Yeah, it's where the everything is set. It's also where
uh,
Manel Lorero lives. Like
there we go.
he this is one of these guys who wrote a book about his life and it was just set his life in a zombie apocalypse,
Nice.
which I can 100% relate to. That's
Well,
how
I
I
have
felt.
never been to this area, but it looks awesome. So I think I'll have to figure that out one of these days. But yeah, they're in this like little community. It looks like I mean, my guess is that it was probably a lot easier to film here. I don't think I think filming in Barcelona would be really, really hard. So,
Oh yeah, yeah. And in the book, I think that was just like a quick flight to Barcelona to check on his sister when things started to go badly, and then they used the scenes that were for that visit as his visit to the airport. Like it all works out. They still
yeah.
get the beats for the story. They just kind of shifted some things around, and I thought it worked really well too. And then he wasn't like trying to do air travel during the outset of a zombie
Right.
apocalypse.
Right.
Um, so they have this little get together with his sister. You get to establish how close he is with his sister, that he has a good relationship with his nephew, that he has a video camera on his cat feeder, and that Julia and him have some tension.
Yes. And I mean, it's pretty clear they do a good job of showing this. There's a lot of looks exchanged. She's doing a lot of sighing. And then in the car, and this is like Christmas Eve or near Christmas. And on the way home, in the drive home, basically it comes out that she's basically upset because he doesn't want to have children, or at least doesn't want to have them now. And as they start to get into it, they have a pretty horrific car accident, and it's a little bit of a it's a little bit of a mind twist here because they give them a near miss for one and then they get absolutely taken out. And I thought that the transition here was really excellent. And they're able to basically put a lot into the like move the storyline forward without really honestly without missing a beat and without all that much camera time, because it jumps right to the point where he's alone in his apartment
Yeah.
with his cat suffering like still suffering from grief.
A
And
year later too, which
yeah,
is yeah,
and
which is where that's where the book starts too. So it's like a if you've read the book, it's like a familiar place for them to get to, and they get there in the first 10 minutes of the movie, so it's perfect.
but just to speak about like the editing, the filming, the cinematography, I thought that the action scene where they did the accent was really well done.
Oh yeah,
Then in to immediately cut to the calm of him being like depressed in bed and like it sets up. a lot of things and gives you a lot of context in an excellent way without having to do a ton of exposition through like dialogue.
Hmm.
So I thought it was just great the way they did this. And the color, like honestly, the colorization of the film, like the saturation or desat, like it's a very pretty film. Um, so I was enjoying that as well, but.
Yeah. They have one
Um,
or two drone shots that I thought worked so well too, especially when he's out on the water later on in the movie and his engine gives out and it was like perfectly framed. I love the way that that shot was put together.
Yeah. There's almost like a soft, like almost like the way the color is and there's a little bit of a dreamlike quality. So I do think that there's a bit of because you're sort of dealing with the aftermath of his grief. There's almost, at least I was like feeling this, that there was almost like a dreamlike quality. Like, is this real? Is this like his perception of looking through things is almost a little foggy too. So like he's kind of honestly stumbling through the world a little like a zombie, which is why he's not noticing or why the urgency and the sort of the crisis that's unfolding, he's not processing it as much or it's not registering with him as much. So I thought that
Yeah.
that was a very clever way to do it. I'm assuming that they do that in the books too, but visually I thought they did a great job at showing just his state of mind and how it's affecting his perception or non-perception of what's happening.
Yeah, I think this is actually kind of different from how they do it in the book. Because again, in the book, you're from his perspective, so he's not going to be like, "Oh, people are." You know, actually, he could say, "Oh, there's people freaking out about this illness," but I'm not worried. In fact, he's paying really close attention and writing about it in his blog, right? Like he is, and you see in all these scenes, he has the news on, and maybe that's their attempt to be like he's paying attention to what's going on, but then his actions don't seem to reflect the
Right.
seriousness of the situation by like going to the grocery store and being like surprised when people are mobbing everything, right? There's a few scenes before we get to that part of the storyline, and here he's just kind of like waking up, like you said, he's looking depressed. He's wearing sweatpants and drives down to the marina to try and sell his boat or his wife's boat. The boat is a huge, it's a pretty significant character. Also in the book, they really don't let it be that way in the film, and that's fine because that would have added like another 30 minutes to the film probably. But yeah, they at least nod to the fact that there is a boat. It's not actually his in the book either, but he's here he is trying to sell his boat and having more memories about his wife and this bracelet that is a big part of the story in the movie that isn't really something that it just all helps with showing how he's processing still the loss of his wife. And I would say in the book that doesn't really come across quite as well because in a way he's like more over it in the book, or at least you get the impression that he is.
Yeah.
But here in the movie it works well. It's also that trope of like not really paying attention to the news, even though it's on. Like he walks out of the room in one scene where they cut to a shot of a zombie on a gurney basically writhing, and you know, Manel is clearly not in the room or seeing that. And so when he does see it later on in the film, he is more shocked and surprised.
But I kind of like that because the audience sees it. They know what's happening. They know how
Yeah.
serious it is, but he's kind of got blinders on. And it's even when he's like going to the grocery store, um, and everybody there's a level of tension. And what I really love is they show him in the grocery store two times. And the first time there's a little bit of edginess
It's
and
pretty crazy, isn't?
it is, but it's like,
Yeah.
and there, there's an announcement that's like, please don't buy more than two things. But he sees that other people are buying more, though he does not appear to. He buys like a little knapsack full of things or
Yeah.
something.
And they do
Um,
show how full his freezer is in the garage. Like it's full to the top, right? So they show that he is a guy who keeps a lot of food on hand.
right. But it's also, the contrast between, and this is when it feels like he starts to sort of notice things a little bit more.
Yeah,
Um,
he's having some looks. He's doing some second,
yeah,
some
yeah.
double
And
takes.
then his interaction with his sister when she basically calls him, I will say, knowing what he knows about his brother-in-law's position in the military, we don't fully know what it is, but
It's
we also,
IT support is what it makes Belen makes it sound like too.
but when she says we're getting moved to the Canary Islands tonight and you should come with us, I think that's where you should probably sit up. And he is pushing against this.
Yeah.
She's like, well, just take a flight out and just do it for me, do it for me. And it what I do like is that there is a question mark about whether he is going to do it or not, and that showing we don't get to see the end of that conversation as the audience, but then when he wakes up the next day and you see that his bag is packed and that's what he's going to do. It's just I think the storytelling is really well done here, and they do an incredible job with editing and the transitions between the different scenes, and they keep it moving along pretty quickly. So that's there isn't a lot of dead air in this film, in my opinion, which is it's a great film to watch. It's really fun to watch too as you watch him kind of discover how urgent things are, although that's a little stressful as an audience member too, I guess.
Yeah. And in between, a lot of these scenes are more shots of what's going on the news because he does always have the news on, and so we're seeing like, oh, TSJ virus is spreading, but no cases in Spain yet, and then it's like, oh, there's some cases in Spain, but we have it all under control, and then eventually it's like, we salute the members of the police and military who are keeping everybody safe as we retreat to the Canary Islands. Like it clearly is this really cool as a side story, like the basically all the news that they created for this movie, I thought was awesome.
Yeah.
And the downward spiral that they clearly illustrate through those various scenes was great too.
I also like I don't know how you were feeling watching this or how much is in the books, but they reference COVID-19 a lot and what
Yeah,
during those years
they're like
and
this could be worse than COVID-19. You're like,
right,
oh,
right. But I also think that it's one of those things where you don't know what you don't know and things are unfolding and just trying the messaging and maybe like different places don't know what's going to happen. But then when you actually see the footage, not that not that there was a zombie apocalypse or anything, but just like they do a very good job of storytelling through these news articles that doesn't the news reporting that doesn't feel forced. It feels very much like it feels almost terrifyingly realistic, where they show the footage from Munich and what's happening there, and then at first it was like, oh, these are just like outbreaks that are happening, but now there's like widespread around the world, and so I thought that they did a great job at ratcheting up the tension and the scariness with that because it was sort of based in somewhat of a realistic response. And I think unfortunately for all of us, we were kind of familiar with that. So I'll tell you, it gave me a little bit of
hmm,
uh, it gave me a little bit of stress to like kind of deal with that. But I thought incredibly well done in terms of um how they were doing it. And it didn't feel like I think sometimes films give that exposition in a way that's just not exactly organic. And this felt organic in the way that they have him how these newscasts are being presented and how they're appearing, and they don't overdo it.
yeah.
So,
And I would say also like in the performance from Francisco Ortiz, he is so chill even when things are going badly, but he does eventually kind of like he gets freaked out, but not until pretty late. Like even on his way back from the airport and when he's stuck in traffic and he basically just gets out of his car and walks home. It's at one point he's like giving advice to the people in the car next to him, like, I don't think you're going to be able to make it to your in-laws or whatever. I think you're going to probably be better off just going right back where you came from. He's a nice guy. Like they show this happen a few times over the course of the film too. His little acts of kindness that he does, and I think it's good illustration of the kind of person that Manel is. That they do subtly or subtly enough that you're never really concerned about is this guy a jerk or a bad guy. He's like a quiet, kind dude who's just taking care of his cat in the zombie apocalypse as one will.
yep.
I enjoyed those.
Who loves his sister? It's
He loves his
great.
sister, and his sister loves him, and she calls
Yep.
him on his way back from the airport, where he had just seen like all flights get canceled, and a guy freaking out and taking a gun from a cop. That scene plays out very differently in the books. And she's like, now there's a new variant, and you got to get out of here. You got to go home and lock the doors. And he does take that to heart, and he goes home. And there's another nod to the stuff in the book here, where he's like watching YouTube videos and like weaponizing his house, making like a spiky fence on top of his wall Because in the book he is more of a survivalist. Like he drops the line in this movie, like I also own a small solar panel company, which
Yeah.
you're like, what? I know you had solar panels, but you own a company? What?
Yeah.
But yeah, in the books, he's like he has solar on his house. It has a high wall. He likes the fact that he doesn't have to look at his neighbors very often because he's kind of a curmudgeon, and he keeps a lot of food on hand. Like he is painstakingly not like an American equivalent, but for Spain, I feel like this guy is probably is probably pretty hardcore survivalist and prepper.
Oh yeah, definitely. And I also think, was he an engineer in the book too? Because it sounds like
Yeah,
kind of he was.
he's a lawyer. Like that's his
But
in the book. I think he's only a lawyer.
okay,
Um,
because I was wondering, like, so for this, I was thinking he was a lawyer plus engineer with the solar thing, which is why he was.
no, I mean in this film, Porchenko says that he's an engineer so that the Russians won't kill him. I think is
Yes, but
basically
I
what's
would.
going
Yeah.
on.
Anyway, all good, all good. But yeah, I mean, he's very much well equipped, more so than most people.
I
To
thought it was fun. I mean, it's Manel Lorero, the author, was a lawyer, I think, when he was writing this book, or had just quit being a lawyer. And there's lines in this about like, you don't want to say that you're a lawyer, and people don't like lawyers very much. So
it's
there's a bit of reflection happening here.
there's
Nice.
always a theme. There's always the theme. But.
So things are going from bad to worse.
But
He
I
he
will
goes
say,
home and
lawyers are incredibly smart and analytical, so he appears to have uh, totally clocked that situation and made it so that he will survive.
he is
So,
very analytical. That's true. Um, so after the airport thing doesn't work, we've got more news stories. His sister tells him now, in one of their last conversations, I want to say, about the quarantine zones that the military is starting to collect people into, and she gives him the advice, do not go to them. Mario, is that her husband's name? Is going to get you over here. Yeah, he's gonna get you to the Canary Islands with us. And so Manel is like, okay, cool. I will not go with the military when they come to evacuate the neighborhood. And like, sure enough, a couple scenes later, there he is, or there they are, really trying to get into his house. Like, really.
yeah, and this part did bother me a little bit because it's like, why would they care so much? I don't know that they would waste this much time trying to get the one guy. It felt a little, it felt a lot. I mean, I think it gave me some kind of parallels between our little intrepid couple in The Last of Us, that they're the Offerman character,
Hmm.
um where he kind of hides out. But
Yeah.
I don't know, this feels like a lot of effort to have one guy come into the quarantine, and doesn't totally make sense later when he comes across somebody else who didn't go,
Yeah, and
because
she's not exactly hiding anywhere.
she isn't either. So anyway, but that's fine. I mean,
Yeah.
what it does show is that he had prepped before, he had reinforced his door, he had done all this stuff with his
Yeah.
house. So
He's
he's
also already seen zombies in public because this is after
right.
the gas station scene, which is a scene that happens in the book too. I think the order's a little different here. The quarantine evacuation happens first before he goes out and starts to see zombies in the public. And I do wonder why they switched that around because it feels like maybe you're a little late on the whole quarantine thing if you already have zombie attacks happening in the streets and cops getting killed, at the gas station down around the corner from your neighborhood. Uh, but I thought that scene was really good too because they really paint these cops as heroes in this scene. He's just like shopping for food because he couldn't find anything at the grocery store the second time he's gone. Like the old
Right.
couple, like the husband from the old couple he had been helping with directions is actively
Turned
ripping
on him,
food out of his house.
turned
Yeah,
on him, turned
boot
on him
food out of his
hard.
hands. And so he's like, this isn't gonna work out. So he goes to the gas station and there one cop runs past him bleeding and locks himself in the gas station so that he can't get out and hurt people. Like selfless act, really cool. And then the other one who gets bit then also like basically saves
Save them.
Manel's life and then kills himself to stop himself from being harmful to anybody else. I thought, man, like you don't often see, nameless law enforcement characters being painted in such a
Positive way.
heroic light. Yeah, it was
Well, and
cool.
I actually really liked that because it's like he's shooting at Manel, but not like to basically keep him away from him because he
Right.
knows he's going to turn. And so that was actually again this film and this director like does a really great job at storytelling and putting a lot of like weight into like these little scenes. Um, and I would say this is we get to see the zombies full stop in this or the infected full stop and it's terrifying and you get to see how fast they are and how powerful they are and what it feels like is it's like the 28 days later rage zombies to some extent like they're willing to like crack their head through like glass and all this
Yeah.
other crazy stuff. And so it's really to me this was a fantastic scene to show all of that and to show what he's dealing with and also that he is fully woken up at this point.
And how
So
he's reacting, because like instead of hiding or running away from the cop who's being attacked by a zombie, he like makes a improvised weapon and is
right.
approaching to try and save the cop when the zombie
Yeah.
looks at him and is like, "Oh, you look tasty."
Yep.
But so again, one of these little acts that Manel takes that just show you like, "Oh, this guy's cool. This guy's good. He's a good guy."
Yep.
But after that's like his first exposure to zombies in public, and then you don't have another one for quite a while because then he basically goes into lockdown in his house, avoiding the QZ evacuation. Although Lucolo isn't helping him there because Lucolo really wants to get out there and attack those guards. It sounds like
Yep.
the military. Um, yeah. So then we're kind of in his house. The military says we're not going to be doing any more TV updates, and it's just going to be using the radio from now on. And then we cut forward 2 weeks, so we're in the future. The neighborhood they're in is nice. Like I like the location that they shot this in. It seems like a very I don't know, like quite a affluent neighborhood.
Residential neighborhood. Yep.
And
Um,
he's looking at his freezer. It's getting low. He's talking in a video message now to Belen that is not going through. You can see that he's just keeps recording new video messages and like saving them basically in his phone in his outbox to maybe they'll go out later. Who knows? But you can tell that he's just been trying to give her updates. And this is a nod to the format of the novel where he's just like he goes from writing a blog, I think, to writing in a journal. But he still has power because he's got solar, he's got a battery. His freezer still works, but he just has no cell signal or internet.
yeah. I mean, again, he's got all the solar power he wants for the most part, so
I don't know, his battery doesn't look that high, but yeah, he's in Spain. He'll be
he's in
fine.
space. He'll be fine.
So we've also been introduced to his wetsuit. That was one of the flashbacks he had with Julia. Julia was of him like talking about how much he loves his wetsuit. And
Yep.
when he goes into his garage, he's looking at, how low the freezer is. He looks at his wetsuit and spear gun on the wall, and you're like, all right, here we go.
Yep.
Here we go,
They
Manel.
set that up pretty well. And he runs into like so then he goes out foraging and uh, you know, he ends up coming across one of the people that was left behind. Um, and again, this is like, showing his character and who he is in this film is, or in this storyline is pretty good. Like he's somebody that basically is always going to be helping other people. And so this is no exception because he runs into this is she I don't know how close of a neighbor she is. But
She could
she
see his house from her house, so I guess that's
okay,
pretty close.
that's pretty close. But not only um does does he um sort of like her name's Gabriella, but not he's going to help her, but she also gives him the lowdown on every she's been paying attention apparently, but tells him all the houses that might have food or whatever. And unfortunately for him, he's just not successful. And she basically is like, well, if that's all there is, we might as well just give ourselves up or something like that to the military. Um, but he's very helpful to her. He's not, there's never a question that he views her as a burden or anything like that. Which makes it even, they have his plan to get to an estuary where they say they're going to evacuate any survivors. This feels a little weird because I guess they had like quarantine camps set up. It does feel like a trap, so to speak.
It does. I think I think they both are kind of skeptical about it until the message repeats in French, and then they're like, "Oh, okay, no, it's legit."
Yeah, I know. I thought that
That's
was
the
kind of funny.
impression I got anyway. It was like,
Um,
"Oh, okay, they're doing it in two languages. It can't be a trap. Must be cool."
And
Uh,
unfortunately, like it does not end well for Gabriella because she does not want to hold him up and she knows he'll never leave her. And again, I think everybody knows that the audience knows that watching this.
and she's already been completely just abandoned by her children,
Yeah,
right? Or like her
yeah.
son and his family. It's a that's a
It's pretty
rough
dark and
thing.
rough. And
Yeah.
yeah, so she basically leaves him a note and again, trigger warning, but she basically committed suicide to basically keep from being a burden so that he wouldn't be held back by her.
And it's
And
a
she
lucky
even
thing that this is not one of those zombie viruses that just turns everybody who
right,
dies into a
it
zombie.
does not. And so anyway, then continues his journey where he's gonna get to, he's always got these goals. So he's gonna get to the estuary to then get to the Canary
Yep.
Islands, but to get there, he's got to get to his boat. And so,
But to get to his boat, he has to go back from Gabriella's house to his house where he left all of his stuff. And as soon as he walks out of her house, we
yep.
get his first real attack from a zombie that he
Oof.
has to get himself out of. And it's a quick jump scare. She is silent and fast
Hmm.
and knocks him around quite a bit. He's basically survives just by pure luck.
Yep.
And the fact that he manages to slam her hair in a car door. And that was a cringeworthy scene where she rips her scalp off,
The
basically.
choreography is so great and the effects are really great. And so um I think it's so awesome. And then even then, after he dispatches her, he's still viewing her as a victim. Like he
Yeah.
puts a license on her. Like he never just sort of puts on the armor of somebody going through this, which is interesting because he's had this armor of grief or like maybe that has been his depression, everything that has actually been um, separating him from the world. And so it's interesting that in this scenario, he is just being very kind and compassionate. And so and we then see him as he continues his journey. I will say this whole sequence like of events where he goes to the marina is just really kind of amazing because then you can see what's been happening everywhere else. You see what's been happening in the camps that they set up, which is nothing good.
Yeah.
Um, you see the first sort of like he's on a dirt bike or some kind of bike, and he does have the cat with him. He has the Cola with him. And it's like you would think that this would be really helpful for him to um get to the marina. Like it's nimble. He doesn't get stuck on the roads like he did with the car initially. But it's loud enough that it's attracting all the infected.
And
And
he's
there's
driving through some pretty unwise areas.
Yes, and they're terrifying. And so this whole thing where they're screaming, again, the effects are really good. The filming and the editing is really good. And they do a very good job at showing and raising the tension. And so he eventually has to like ditch the bike. And it's like this whole thing where he's like running. I mean, I will say running full stop with a cat in a carrier
Yeah.
is such a great
And
thing
a
that
spear
they did.
gun in a wetsuit. Like,
And
no way he was going to stay in front of those zombies who are running
no,
full bore.
no.
But, it's still entertaining. I mean, he must have been close enough to the marina. He does get there also, again, just barely.
Mm.
One, and like I like the way that they set this up too, where he closes one door while he gets out his other keys, and it's inevitable that he's going to get there. Otherwise, the movie would be over very quickly. But
Right.
it's still tension. It's tension inducing.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah.
very tense scene. And then when he gets into the marina, they kind of delayed showing you as he was getting in that there are zero boats there. Like his boat is gone. Every other boat that you see is gone, or that you might have seen before. But he gets some useful equipment from the marina office, which is spear gun spears, I guess, and chem lights, which all come in handy.
Hmm.
over the course of the film. And then he does see another boat that has been left moored in the harbor and goes over to it. And there's a pretty nasty scene here, which is ripped from the book also, although not, when it happens is different. Of a, he's like trying to get this boat to start, and it's not starting.
You know,
Uh, and then
they hear something.
he hears a noise, and in the cargo or the room of the boat is just a nasty scene of a baby.
Yeah, zombie baby. And then they immediately cut to him. Well, he's not taking this boat.
Yeah,
So
he
he goes,
noped the hell out of there and got into the dinghy like a Zodiac.
yep,
And this is where he had like he's still recording some messages for Belen. He's like, "Look, you wouldn't believe where I am, or this was crazy. The military bases are overrun, and I'm going to, I'm going to, like he's just telling her what he's doing, which is we know what he's doing already. So I don't know. It's just showing that he's still thinking about her and still wanting to communicate with her.
yep. And then he runs into, militant Ukrainians.
I think
Uh,
no, they're all well in the book
Russians.
at least. They were Russians and other international people who were like the kind of people who would crew a cargo ship for maybe a criminal Russian organization.
Yeah. Well,
But
they
there was
feel
like a
very,
lot of Indian, Bangladeshi, the Filipinos. I feel like was the makeup of the crew. But in the movie version, it's just mostly Russian looking dudes.
yeah. And they're interviewing him. He is talking about his worth and is smart enough to know that he needs to show that he's, somebody worthy. And he is, because he also has knowledge of the country and things. I will say some of the things that they quiz him on later is like, oh, where's this concrete factory? I don't know that I can name a concrete factory
No,
um,
but
anywhere, but
Manel does. He,
he
like you
he
said,
apparently does. He knows lots of things.
lawyers know everything about where they live
They
and
do.
for
They are
50 to 100 miles in every direction. But here we also have met Prochenko, played by, like I said, that guy whose name is
Pachenko.
no, his name is Jose Maria Yazbek.
Yep, he's great.
His mother is actually of Lebanese descent, not Ukrainian, but I guess they figured, sure,
Yep.
sure, you can.
Um,
And he's speaking Russian to Yushikov. I don't know how good it is. My Russian is not good. Um, there's some definitely weird stuff that's off about this boat that they're on now, this tanker, the Zarin, I forget what it's called, but yeah, the name of the boat is the same in the book. And this is a scenario. They're basically moored in the middle of this harbor, and in every direction around them, the city of Vigo is kind of just destroyed.
yep.
But Ushakov, um, no, they basically say to this guy, to Manel, like, go to bed, you're gonna be fine. And then overnight, he hears a ruckus and sees a dinghy with more people in it, and he's been asking like, oh, are there other survivors? And they're like, no, you're the only one. And then the next day, he's I think his spidey sense is going
Right.
because he's like seeing guards closing doors and yelling at him. And Ushakov is not Ushakov, but Prochenko is now bleeding and like bruised on his face and lying about it. And so yeah, I think we can
Well,
see the wheels turning.
he's giving these faces to Manel that's like, don't ask any more questions. And then he
Yeah,
kind of directly says, don't ask any more questions.
yeah.
Because he's just like he's trying to like give him a signal like you're gonna get into trouble here. And then he sees that there's belongings that are being going through, and Manel is like, look, he wants to know what's going on. I think he also thinks he may have to get out of here pretty soon. And so he starts doing a little bit of exploration of the boat. And indeed, they are keeping some refugees captive. And then he he really, I do like how um, the the idea that he has an ally in and this is the thing like I do think that this initial conversation with Pachenko when he says he knows of a place with a helicopter, that's kind of what piques Pachenko's interest. And I
But at
mean,
first he rejects it, right? He's like,
well, he
get out of
does
here.
more, I think more so because he's worried other people are going to hear them, or because
Mm.
he's really worried about the danger of Ushakov. And so he just tries to like shut him down. But as we eventually he throws all in with Mena and to his own detriment to some extent.
Yeah, I mean, Manel made this decision to try and save these two guys
Yeah.
who are tied up in the bilge. What happens to the sister and mother of this family unit, you never find out. It's
Never
kind of
find out. It's
pretty
just it's
messed
all
up. But they're
scream.
apparently being held somewhere for, to be taken to this island refuge or whatever they're calling it.
Yeah.
But the dad of this family has a real yelling problem.
Hmm.
He's just, he's overwrought. He can't stop yelling. And even though it's funny, like they keep showing him looking at the stairs over and over again, like two or three times. This guy looks at the stairs in between yelling at his son and at Manel, who's trying to get them untied. And as
Yeah.
soon as he gets up and starts running for the stairs, again yelling, he gets shot by this Russian guy who's managed to come into the room unnoticed, I just thought that was funny. Uh, and then the son of this guy just appears to, because the action goes quite quickly,
Yep.
like Prochenko overpowers and kills with a piece of rope this Russian guard, and then they're all going to get off the boat, all three of them. Now there's the son, Prochenko and Manel. And but the poor son character, quietly, he's gotten over the death of his father, the disappearance of his mom and his
Uh-huh.
sister. Like he's just cool. He's going with it. He's like, I will tiptoe with you guys off of this boat because I don't feel like I should yell like my dad did. I got him killed.
Yep.
And then as soon as they do the exchange of nods, like we did it, we
Yep.
got off the boat, we're gonna push off.
Mhm.
Dude gets a bullet right in the head.
Yep.
Uh,
It's done very quickly. Although I say, again, editing and the storytelling, they keep the cast pretty tight.
oh
So
yeah, there
this
was no
show.
room for this extra guy,
No, there was not.
even
So
though it was a big boat and they had
yeah,
plenty of space.
you can focus now on Manel and Pachenko's like adventure to the hospital and
Because
Pachenko.
Pachenko manages to get shot in that exchange
Yeah,
too.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
The Russians did kind of suddenly appear at the side of the boat shooting at them.
And
There
I
weren't
did,
any.
I'm always focused on where the cat is, and I was relieved to see the cat was in the car with them.
Yeah, it's
Um,
funny because in the book, there's a mission to shore from the boat, and they actually keep Lucalo on the boat as almost as like leverage.
oh,
It's a pretty interesting. Honestly, it's a fun section of the book. There's this whole mission to the shore with Prochenko and Manel and some other. Well, we don't know his name's Manel, but and some other people. Uh, so it's another section of the book that they've been like, we don't have time for this. But it does color in a lot more of the Prochenko Manel relationship in the book, which is pretty fun, and it's an action-packed sequence in the book. But in this case, yeah, Prochenko's been shot. They need to get to a hospital, but also that's where the helicopter is, they think.
yep. And conveniently, the hospital where Manel's wife died, so that's going to bring back some PTSD for him. And I do like, again, the filming as they kind of get to the hospital and there's infected all around, and then the journey in the hospital, like because they're looking, it's really disappointing because he gets there and it's not where he thinks it should be.
The
And
helicopter,
sort
yeah.
of, yeah, the helicopter, and then he's got Prochenko who's still like super injured, and Prochenko's like, you got to get the bullet out of me, man. And then they discover some of the survivors in the hospital, which are
Yeah, I will say this is kind of like the weak spot. To me, the weaker
yeah,
part. I mean, it's the third act. It's so common for this to be more weak. But like, so Manel leaves Pachenko on a operating table and is like, "I'll be right back," because he sees supplies through a window. He leaves Lucalo in the room. He leaves Pachenko in the room, and then he kind of goes looking for supplies, and then he hears voices. And then he kind of forgets about Prochenko and just
yeah.
wanders around yelling into air vents while there are zombies like 20 feet away from him. It was just a little bit, I
It was
thought
a
this
lot.
that was disappointing to me that he kind of suddenly lost his senses and instead of like helping the guy who's bleeding out is concerned about the voices he's hearing from the air vents. That's
Um,
kind of my beef.
but it all works out because there's some kind of a nurse and a nun with three kids, and obviously they're gonna help them, and he makes it into their little safe haven. Again, I think I agree with you. There's no way. There's many places where Manel would not survive, and Pachenko would not survive. Luculum is resourceful, so I think he'll always survive. But
We don't even know if these zombies eat animals, so yeah, Lucula might have been
you know,
fine the whole time.
but anyway, they get into basically what their little safe haven has been, and the nun, I guess, is a doctor or something, or at least has some kind of medical knowledge because she and the nurse basically get the bullet out of Porchenko. In the meantime, Lucolo and Manel are making friends with the kids.
Those are
And
sweet scenes, the like
they are,
whispered,
they
the little
are.
whispers of the kids. Did you watch this, by the way, in English or Spanish?
So it started out with the English overdub, but I don't enjoy that because I feel you miss some of the nuance. So I switched it to Spanish with English subtitles.
Yeah.
Um,
It's just it's tougher to write keep notes while that's happening because then you have to yeah, you have to like pause
it
a lot for
is,
me.
but I just anyway, it was that was like a great scene, and because I
And
think
three such cute little kid actors. They were just
and because the nurse is sort of like sees this, and she
yeah,
then and he brings up, he basically says, "I'm sorry to cause trouble for you, and we were coming here because we heard that there was a I thought there was a helicopter." And then suddenly she's like, "Oh, is one of you a pilot?" And so I really love that because then immediately, I mean, it's a little unrealistic because um they, it, they've been sort of holed up there and they don't know who to trust, and it's not exactly like they know a ton, but about Manel and Pachenko, but they're better than other options and they don't have other options. So
yeah.
she shows him where the helicopter is, and um, they start to make plans to try to get to it. But in the meantime,
Well, it
he's got,
seems like they don't have a good option because she talks about how there was an explosion in the boiler room. That's the only way to get there, and it would be too dangerous for the
yeah,
children. So
right.
it's like it's not a good enough option, and so they're kind of just killing more time in a way with, and that gives Manel time to go up to the roof and think, and he's like he gets a bunch of messages through on his phone from his sister, and he starts to watch some of them while when suddenly he starts to hear gunshots and oh yeah, yelled Russian, and he looks down and there's yeah seven of Ushakov and Ushakov himself, seven of his guys are entering the hospital. So this is their ticking clock sort of thing for the third act. Now they have to get out. Now they have to get to the helicopter. They'll have to risk the fume-filled boiler room.
Right, and in a whole
Interesting.
hospital, there's apparently no kind of better masks than
I
the
did
little
not.
bit of
Yeah, I was looking at that like, why now they don't have one of their hands free? Like maybe all the
right.
PPE was used up.
I
That's
don't know, but
possible.
it still is like, let's just put handkerchiefs over our face and that's going to protect us from the poisonous fumes. So that bothered me.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I do like how they do a callback because there was like a video he had been watching, that Manal had been
Hmm.
watching about how to stay safe from the zombies. And it was like this kind of like cage thing. And so he sees these, kind of like transport cages on wheels. And and this is a little bit like, there is the whole scene with the Korean,
Oh yeah,
um,
there was a definite
yeah,
scene of
yeah,
this in All of Us Are Dead. Yeah.
yeah. And so basically they build a cage around all of them to protect them from the
Yeah.
zombies.
Well,
And
not all of them, because on their way through the boiler room, they like opened one door and a zombie jumps out and kills Sister Cecilia.
right,
So
right.
she
So
gets got, and then I don't remember. They just leave her behind, I think, to change. She
yeah,
doesn't get they don't no coup de grace for her.
I don't
And then
think so.
they also go to another like loading dock area where one of the kids sees her mom, and they're briefly separated, and then the Russians also come in and shoot all the zombies and then leave again. It's like a weird anticlimactic sort of scene where you're like, "Oh, is this the big con?" Nope, it's not the big confrontation.
And then the
But
big
it's a moment of like, peril with Manel and one little kid in a closet. But then they get kind of quickly reunited with the others and create their
cage
cage wagon thing, which is a cool plan. I don't know that his use of the fire extinguisher was that useful, but Lucia
no.
is slaying bodies with her axe
Yep.
and doing some great work, and the kids are just all in a cardboard box somewhere, right? Like
They're
it's a cool little vehicle to get to the
It
helicopter.
is. And I do, again, the filming is good. It feels very quick moving. They don't waste time. And, they do things where it's like they cut off the lock on the fence, they get in, and the way they release them into this little area is pretty cool. And then they have to like secure it again. Um, And I will say, I do like how Pachenko's like, I don't know how long it's going to take me to like set this up because it depends on the condition of the helicopter, all this stuff. It may take a bit, and it does. And so I like that, and it feels realistic versus just trying to create tension. Like it feels realistic, like that he is trying to get this set up, and it takes more. It's not like going to be instantaneous. And then in the meantime, the Russians, Ukrainians show up, and Manel is like, and some of the zombies are breaching the fence, and Manel, who has been safely in the helicopter, gets out to try to address this.
This is his full-on hero moment. Yeah, he
Yeah, it's
gets
really
out
good.
and he is now able to just, I mean, I don't know that he's ever swung an axe at a person before, but he's doing it over and over again now, where he has this like approach. He hits them once in the stomach and then another time over the head. And he does it to like four zombies in a row before the Russians show up. And then he's just like, he puts his hands up. He's like, okay, I give up. I surrender.
Yep.
Uh, and then he has another heroic move where he opens another gate and lets a bunch of other zombies who hadn't come into the area
Yeah, and they
in.
overrun the Russians. And, this is a really, I honestly, I thought the sequence was so great because it's like you think he might get left behind and then they throw the ladder down. And what I thought was going to happen was that this little ladder from the
It's
helicopter was
such a
going
little ladder.
it is so tiny. It was terrifying to think about trying to crawl up one of those things. But I thought that the zombie that was kind of chasing him was going to grab on the end of it. I thought there was going to be like one last jump scare, and they didn't do that. But
It was,
he,
yeah, because they showed another zombie,
Mhm.
but I don't remember how she got taken out.
I think she just got left behind in the
She's just down
ladder
there
pulled
still.
up.
Yeah.
Yeah. But him and Prochenko have all these like they're it's this really like great hero moment, and he's safe, and they're all safe, and they're flying towards the Canary Islands, and he finally gets a hold of Belen, and he tells her, "Hey, we're on our way, and it's awesome. Everything's okay. All is well with the world." And she's like, "Turn around, don't come here." And it's like, it's a really great cliffhanger. I don't know how the books end, but this was just such a great. His whole goal has been to get to safety. We think the safety is the Canary Islands. It reminds me of Dawn of the Dead when they go to the island and we see
Oh
the after
yeah. Oh
scenes,
yeah.
the after the credit scenes, and but they're the minute he hears her say that, suddenly he sees these fighter jets like kind of fly over them, and it's not clear. They don't seem to be going after the helicopter, but it's not clear what they're doing. It doesn't
They're
seem
going in the direction of the Canary
right.
Islands,
So
that's for
that's
sure.
scary, and that's scary. We don't see. I was like, oh, are we going to see like an explosion? Are we going to see something where they're taking out the Canary Islands? But we don't see that. It's just this his like Menel looking incredibly panicked, and then it just cuts to black.
Yeah. So I will
So
say the Ushakov appears to get killed at the end of this movie, and I don't think he's dead at the end of the book. So I don't know if he's supposed to come back later. Um, there that might be something that they have to work around if they're doing second movies. But yeah, like I think that's pretty much, as I recall, the direction of the book is like, oh no, what are you doing? Don't come here. That's a terrible idea. You know. But I also don't think there's little kids in the book. It's basically Lucia and Prushenko and Manel. So well, introducing three little kids is also just fraught in any zombie story. We'll see. I'm very excited for them to make a second movie of this story. I wonder though how well the author is able to keep writing about the stuff that he knows well, as the idea of a lawyer living in, uh, outside of Vigo becomes farther and farther away from his reality of the character in the book.
yeah, I am curious to see what they do. I'm worried that they're going to kill off some of these characters, but I was worried that Prashenko wasn't going to make it because I didn't read the book. So I was worried that that was going to be that he was going to sacrifice himself. But I'm like, but how can Manel fly the helicopter? So I did think that this I don't know what they're going to do or how they're going to manage this group um, in the sequel because I do think that the kids there is a liability. And they're like, I don't think you can go into battle or whatever, and that's gonna be pretty hard.
Or maybe they'll just do the Fear the Walking Dead thing and the kids will just disappear from the
Yeah,
story, and nobody
maybe.
will ever mention them ever again.
As long as they keep the cat, though, we're good.
I mean,
Um,
Skidmark kind of disappears every so
I
often too.
know, no, he does. So let's hope Piccolo does not. But I really thoroughly enjoyed this movie. I thought it was really well crafted. I thought the storytelling was excellent. I am going to go and read the books now. So I'm very excited to hear more. I hope that the one little note about it being in production isn't untrue. Like, um, I am really hoping they do more of this. I thought that the direction and production of the movie was excellent, and that I highly recommend this. I saw some of the ratings though, and I was a little surprised that some people rated this as they did. To me, this is one of the strongest movies I've seen in a really long time.
And
So
what was the rating on Rotten Tomatoes?
there was like, it wasn't just Rotten Tomatoes, but we have our usual
Yeah.
go-to that we see, and it just, people were giving it like less than 3 stars, which I really don't agree with.
Hmm.
Um, so, I'm not, it's fine. You don't have to agree with me on that kind of thing. But like on IMDb, it was like 3 stars, and let me see what Rotten Tomatoes was.
It's a
Um,
66% on the audience, and then there's only 9 reviews, so the tomato-ometer does not actually
nah,
show anything.
then that's a little lame. But then
66% ain't too bad.
no, it's not. And then if you see just kind of there's a lot of like positive things about on Reddit, sort of on some of the horror forums and things like that. So I really am excited to see the sequel to this. So let's keep track of this and hope it really is in production and that it comes out soon. Though I would say it's gonna be probably going to be a bit. This was just released in October, so
Yeah, yeah.
my guess is that they're still in early days, whatever they're doing with this. So we shall see. One of the interesting things, though, and that was one of the comments that I saw in the Rotten Tomatoes, somebody really complained that it was too slow. Did you? I felt like it was really well paced.
Yeah,
But
I don't think that it was slow at all. Like it had like a sine wave of, action and chill time, and I think the book kind of reads the same way. So I will say I'm jealous of you getting to read the book for the first time. I would say the first act of the book is really exciting. Like how the protagonist survives in his little fortress of solitude, and then how he eventually breaks out is some really riveting stuff. So I'm jelly that you get to read that for the first time.
yeah.
Enjoy it.
Really enjoyed talking about this with you. If our audience enjoyed watching this or have thoughts on it, please drop us a line at reanimatedpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear what you think.
Indeed. And if you want to look up any of our other episodes, they're all online at reanimated.podbean.com. And thank you for listening.